In the kingdom of Pharaohs, which is ruled by magicians, a long battle of royal succession war is currently brewing. However, tonight, it will finally reach its end. The second prince sitting on the throne orders his most trusted servants to eliminate his greatest threat to the throne, the ninth prince Heirs. His followers honor his wise decision and have been waiting for him to give them orders to prove their loyalty to him. The prince then commands them to raid Heirs' residence at the detached palace and kill all his guards and servants and leave no traces or proof. One of his followers calls for his attention, stating that he feels another presence and it feels dangerous. Just then, the follower suddenly drops dead, and a mysterious man with glowing red eyes appears, asking if the boy sitting on the throne is the second prince. The prince is suddenly alarmed and fears for his safety. His swordsman steps in and unsheaths his blade. He recognizes the assassin based on his glowing red eyes, and states that in their sacred kingdom, the only filthy inferior race that possesses no magic is like him, whom they call a Galda or non-magical. Disgusted by his presence, the swordsman swings his blade toward the Galda. However, even without magic, the Galda, whose name is Van, still manages to defeat the swordsman. He uses the technique Fatal Strike against his enemy and hits the nasal bone at a specific angle, creating injury to the brain. When this happens, being a magic user will not really matter, since after all, they are still humans who can die from major injuries. He now stands against the mage who casts a spell to eliminate him. However, Van is faster than the mage and manages to give him a kick and break his jaw in the process. As a result, he has dislocated his maxilla suture, making the mage writhe in pain. He then mocks the mage for taking his time to chant. He then leaps and gives the mage another attack, effectively defeating him. The prince is shocked that he managed to beat his swordsman and magician even without magic. Van points out that non-magic users like him can definitely win against magic users. Enraged, the prince asks if he is an assassin hired by Heirs. He admits that he is an assassin, but he is not hired and is simply doing it as a favor for a friend. The prince refuses to believe that he is a friend to royalty and mocks his origin and kin. Since he is a non-magical user, he is nothing but scum and livestock, and can never be a friend to royalty. As he moves away from Van, he asks how much he was paid and offers to double or triple it for his loyalty. However, Van chooses to end his life for mocking the non-magical users. Soon the second prince's death is announced as death by illness. The funeral is conducted solemnly, and the long palace intrigue ends. Elsewhere, Van visits his good friend, the ninth prince, Heirs. The prince thanks him for eliminating his brother for him, since because of it he will definitely become the next king. Van congratulates his friend, asking how it feels to finally achieve his long-held dream. Heirs corrects him, reiterating that this is their dream, and swears that when he ascends the throne, he will definitely remove the discriminatory policies against the Galda non-magical race. He will see to it that nobody will ever call them livestock anymore. They then fist bump to this, affirming their promise. The prince then invites him to his coronation night, but Van replies that it will be best not to because it will affect his image as the new king. Heirs reiterates that he will not let such a thing happen, emphasizing that he needs his friend to be there. However, Van ultimately turns down his offer, afraid that it will cause trouble for him as the new king. He will patiently wait until people change their minds about them, knowing that it will not be an easy feat. The prince thanks him for his consideration and understanding. With this, he suggests to his friend that he go home and take a rest for the meanwhile. After all, the long battle is over, and he can now spend time with his family. Van smiles at the idea and thanks his friend for letting him have his vacation. Later, Van is taking a rest at his dwelling and cleaning his body. He then goes to his old study and sees the books piling up on one side of the room and the stand-ins he used for training, all covered in dust. Then it dawns on him that the battle is finally over. Looking back, this battle started when they were young. They both dreamed of a whole different world. Because of this, he became an assassin that no one would ever detect because of his lack of magic. Heirs reminded him that their road to change would not be easy. They would be up against powerful swordsmen, mages, and magical warriors. The prince also pointed out that him being a Galda posed more disadvantage and doubted if he could really win against masters who perfected magic. Confident with what he could do, Van stated that he would learn magic too, which the prince found impossible. If he could not use it, then he would be the best person in the world to know magic and use it against the magic users. He planned to use martial arts to overcome his lack of magic. Heirs smiled at him because, since he is Van, he knew that he could do anything if he set his mind to it. At present, Van feels nostalgic as he flips the pages of an old magic book. He puts it back on the pile again and mutters that it was really a long battle. Later, Van is on his way to his home and is trying to buy some fruits for his little sister. He is about to pay for the fruit, but the shop owner notices that he has red eyes. He points at the anti-Galda poster at the back and states with disdain that he does not sell to scums like him. As retaliation, he snatches his copper coins back. The other shop owners then start to notice him as well and express confusion about his presence in the royal capital. They treat him like someone with a contagious disease, afraid that if they come close to him, they will lose their magic as well. The ancient kings have decided that the Galda or the non-magical race will serve as livestock for the Alkasol or magical race. This gave birth to the differences in systems and evaluations based on magic quantity. Because of the divide, the magical race started to exploit the non-magical race. They were used for life-threatening hard labor and as advanced troops in wars. The only equal to them is the heavy taxation. But whenever there was social unrest and threat of monarchy overthrow, the Galdas were the first ones being blamed, which resulted in their slaughter. Of course, the nation turned a blind eye to the unjust killings. Even the natural disasters that plagued the country were all the fault of the non-magical folks. Their unfair and inhumane history makes Van sick, and as he walks around the capital being cursed by the people, he wonders if there will be a time when his kin can live with smiles. Just then, he sees a girl stumble on her feet. She starts to cry while Van is trying to help her. She looks at him in the eyes and sees the red glowing orb. Instead of getting terrified, she sparkles in childish innocence and blurts out that they look so cool, which surprises Van. She runs back to her playmates and thanks him for helping her. Van hopes that someday magical and non-magical humans will join hands just like him and Heirs did. Together, they will definitely change the country. Later, as the night deepens, Van finally arrives at his village after 10 years of being away. He wonders if his family will be glad upon seeing him. He remembers that his mother used to tell him that he must bring a wife with him when he goes back to their village. She reminded him that if it gets tough, he could always come back home. Lena, his sister, promised that if he did, she would cook the mushroom soup he liked so much. They all hugged him and gave him a trinket that would remind him how much they loved and cared for him. However, to his utter horror, his village is being engulfed in huge fire. Van immediately leaps into action and checks if anyone is injured. He then sees a man on the ground and checks if he is still breathing. But then from a distance, he spots more people hurt. As he slowly sinks in despair, he wonders if this is all because of a bandit attack and that this is far from what they usually do. Extremely worried, he runs to his home to check on his mother and Lena. As he frantically runs, he desperately wishes for them to be safe and alive. After all, the reason he has kept fighting all these years for equality and fairness for the Galda is because he wants them to have a normal life. However, he is too late. He sees his mother tortured, dead, and dangling from a tree. While his heart is breaking, he hears his sister's faint voice calling for him. He sees her tortured as well, her body full of injuries. As she is dying, she tells her brother to escape because there are people looking for him. He contemplates if they could be remnants of the second prince's faction. Seeing her struggling, he tells her not to talk anymore and promises to bring her to safety. But he knows that his sister is in critical condition because of her severe blood loss. While fighting for her life, she reveals to him in a low voice that she has gotten really good at cooking and that she is really excited to make him try her cooking. She weakly smiles at him as her life slowly drains away from her. She touches his face for the last time and reminds him to never blame himself for what happened. Lena's hand goes limp and drops, a heartbreaking sign that her life has slipped away. Van starts to sob, but a blade is then thrust into his heart by one of the royal guards. The guards celebrate as they declare that they have vanquished the leader of the rebels. The guard is about to stab him once again and asks why he is not dodging. He heartbreakingly answers that there is no one left that he wants to protect, so he does not have any reason to live anymore. The guard sneers and finds it easy to defeat him. Before he accepts his inevitable death, he asks why they had to die and who ordered their death. Without skipping a beat, the guard answers that the newly crowned king ordered the killings because he deems that all non-magical users are useless for their country. Knowing his friend and the promise they had, Van refuses to believe him. As if on cue, Heirs arrives and greets his friend. The guards all bow down at his presence while Van is incredulous and feels so betrayed seeing his good friend be the figure behind the death of his family. Heirs reveals that he became a threat to him. He has turned into a deadly weapon that can kill magicians with physical strength alone and without being detected by magic. If he wanted to, he could shake the peace of the whole kingdom, and so even before he could betray Heirs, the king decided to eliminate him now. Van slowly lays down his sister and states that his friend has been deceiving him all along. Heirs answers that he will still keep his promise of removing the discrimination against the Galda race. However, he will eliminate all of them as well. The guard then attempts to strike Van again, but this time, the man dodges the attack and holds the blade with his bare hand. Seeing him brace for the fight even though he is severely injured, Heirs declares that he is really a monster. The guards take position to protect their king while Van leaps and uses the Galda shadow style technique to crash Heirs. The king retaliates by using his magic. the arrow of light. Their clash creates a massive crater in the whole village. The king scoffs at his old friend, stating that even in his severe state, Van is still fighting to protect the body of his dead sister. This is the Van he knows. Even in death, he will stand proud and will refuse to kneel in front of the magical race. He finds him foolish and bids him goodbye as he leaves Van with a huge hollow in his body. Later, as Van's body lies in the open, a seemingly magical creature approaches him and gives him another chance at life to do better and have his revenge. After some time, Van opens his eyes and looks at his own hands and feet. Disoriented, he wonders if he is still alive and is trying to make sense of his surroundings. Somehow, the place looks familiar to him. Just then, he hears Lena's voice calling out to him. He panics and is utterly shocked that she is still alive. Confused, she asks if he is still half asleep and urges him to wash his face so he can join them in breakfast and celebrate his birthday. His mother suddenly enters the room and greets him a happy 15th birthday, and this is when he realizes that he is back in the past, 10 years ago. It is a nice sunny day, and the family is having their celebration outside. Van is still in disbelief with what is happening and wonders if he is having a long dream. A strong wind blows, causing a flower to lose its petals. He catches one of them, his reflex quick, and Lena finds this amazing. He then realizes that the martial arts that he studied long and hard have stayed with him. Aside from that, the memory of his village burning, Lena's final words, the betrayal of his friend, and the sword that was driven into him are all still clear, and scream that they are all real. Seeing him acting strange, Lena checks if her brother is okay. Van assures her that he is okay and there is nothing to worry about. Just then, their mother calls them to eat together and celebrate. Elsewhere, a woman is riding her horse alongside the guards. One of them apologizes to her for not being able to find any A-rank or higher magicians elsewhere. She criticizes the knights for lacking in response, pointing out that there were civilians harmed. She then sees the Galda village ahead. Unfamiliar with it, the guard explains that the people in the village are not exactly the country's citizens but livestock. The woman finds this disturbing but does not say any word and just continues to ride. Meanwhile, back in the village, Van savors his favorite soup and states that it is nostalgic. His mother hears this and finds it odd since she just cooked for him the other day. He nervously laughs and admits that it is his favorite, so he craves it all the time. Lena sweetly tells her brother that she helped with the cooking. He blurts out that no wonder the ingredients are uneven. Pissed, Lena turns to their mother to complain about Van. He then lovingly looks at the two most important people in his life and realizes that he has been given a chance to start over from 10 years ago. However, he does not know what to do or where to start. Seeing the worry etched on his face, his mother asks if he is still worrying about the path he will take. He then remembers that at 15 years old, Galda men should decide their path. He has 3 choices at this stage of his life. 1. Do low-wage labor in the Galda town. 2. Leave town and throw himself into life-threatening hard labor under contempt. And lastly, become a mercenary. While Galda have no magic power, many of them possess strong physical bodies. Also, due to their nature of not being detected by magic, they can serve effectively as scouts or spies. When the kingdom is under war, the Galda mercenaries are the first to be deployed to the front lines. They are treated as someone they can easily discard and as effective pawns for the army. But if ever they survive the war and the missions, they are guaranteed a high compensation. Van is hugged by his mother, who now has tears in her eyes. She cries for the safety of her son, who has stated his decision to be a mercenary. She will not say that the path he has chosen is bad. After all, the reason that they can eat now is because of the fortune that her husband earned on the battlefield. But since they are talking about her only son, she cannot help but worry. Many of the Galda men decide to be mercenaries to earn fortune, even though they know that it is a dangerous life. He had chosen this kind of life too in his previous one and met Heirs. At present, as they happily continue the celebration, the bell of the village echoes, signaling distress. Van realizes something and immediately runs to the town, warning his mother and sister about going there for a while. He ignores their questions and dashes to the town. Meanwhile, in the town, people from the Purification sect, which is a fundamentalist group within the kingdom's mainstream religion, are persecuting Galda people. The group is regarded as extremely radical and branded as heretic even by the church. They see the Galda people as sinners and impurity born from darkness. One of their doctrines is to regard Galda as servants of demons and eradicate them. On his 15th birthday, he remembers that the Purification sect, which was branded as heretic, fled to their region. Autonomous region in name only, they have low security, and the sect easily managed to conquer the town and commit every atrocity in the name of purification. At that time, he could only hide with his family. But now is different because he has the martial arts skill that remained within him. He sneaks from behind as the sect continues their purification on the town. They douse people in flames that they claim have the power to cleanse sin. Meanwhile, as he sneaks from behind, Van surprises a sect member and swiftly strikes. He is undetectable, and this is one of the basic skills that a Galdam mercenary uses against magicians. Once you have the enemy locked in your arms, the assassin should injure the brain and spine. If those vital points are targeted first, the magicians will surely die before they can use their magic. With this, he easily downs the sect member, causing shock and uproar from the others. Another member tries to attack Van for what he did. The man raises his sword and tries to stab him, but Van beats him to it and shoves the blade into his chest instead. The man goes limp after the attack. Only weapons infused with magic can pierce magical defenses, and since he does not have this kind of weapon, he plans on using theirs instead. Another sect member attempts to use magic against him, but Van is much faster. He uses his agility to strike the man first, causing him to drop his staff. While the man is still vulnerable, he attacks again, ultimately defeating his opponent. He then directs his attention to the 3 remaining members and plans to finish them once and for all. Suddenly, a voice echoes ordering him to stop. He then looks at another sect member and sees him dragging a woman with him while holding a weapon. He tells Van to kneel or else he will slay the woman. Van is conflicted and realizes that there are more sect members than he anticipated. He tries to stall and delay the situation, but the sect member threatens to kill the woman again. He finally gives in and raises both his hands, showing that he is surrendering. Now in the clear, the man calls the other remaining members to beat the boy up. The man holding the woman tells them to stop playing around and kill the boy already. However, they do not agree since Van killed their comrades, and so they plan to make him suffer more before eliminating him for good. But the man still urges them to finish it since the kid is giving him a bad feeling. Since the other members still do not agree, the man frustratingly shoves the woman aside and steps in to kill Van instead. Just then, the woman earlier arrives and uses ice magic on the sect member and freezes him on the spot. Her presence speaks volumes and has the guards escorting her. She warns the man to not move carelessly because if he shatters, she would not know how to fix him. She then declares that she is there under the kingdom's orders to pursue the purification sect and place them under arrest. Van is shocked because in his previous life, it should have taken much longer for the reinforcements to arrive from the capital. The woman encloses them all inside her ice, effectively putting them under her restraint. The man tells the other members to free themselves and kill the woman, but to no avail. She then orders the guards to confiscate the sect members' weapons. Later, as the guards carry the frozen sect members, the woman confronts Van. She finds it interesting that he was able to take down 3 purification sect magicians all by himself. It looks like she has something to say about his ability, but chooses to thank him instead. She points at the dead flame magician who could have turned the entire town to ash if he wanted to. She was initially thinking how to deal with the man. It is not like she could not defeat him if they had fought, but she preferred to avoid casualties as much as possible. With this, she admits that Van taking the man out with a surprise attack was a huge help and that they did avoid having casualties. Hearing this, Van realizes that the kingdom acted faster because he had defeated the flame magician. She then asks him what he wants for a reward. However, he turns down her offer and tells her that she was the one who saved his life. He even thanks her to show his gratitude and sincerity. Impressed by him, she extends her hand asking for his name. Van states his name, and the woman introduces herself as Helen. She then invites him to come with her to the Magic Academy, which shocks the boy. The Magic Academy is a boarding school established by 3 nations for the purpose of recruiting talent, whether the person is a commoner or a foreigner. One can enter the academy as long as they pass the entrance exam. Van has heard about the academy before in his previous life. Most of the heroes and magicians were academy graduates, and so he is confused why she is offering such a good deal. Since there are royal guards around, Helen tells him that they should talk privately and grabs his hand to bring him to a quieter area. She smiles at him and admits that this is her first time in the area and so he can tour her around too. Later, they arrive at a serene lake where no one can overhear their conversation. She looks around and asks if no one will know if someone has died in the area. In a surprising move, she casts her bow and arrow made of ice magic and points it at the boy. He then swiftly goes around her back. She is surprised by his agile move, especially when she discovers that he did not use magic and only his pure physical technique. He managed to break her line of sight and step into her blind spot. He grabs her hand but eventually lets her go, realizing that she is just testing him since he did not sense any killing intent. She laughs at his statement, impressed that he seems to have many experiences when he is still so young. She admits that she likes testing things, and now that she has confirmed that he has the power to fight magicians with physical technique alone, she has this sudden thought that he might be able to change the Galda's current situation if he comes to the academy. He pauses for a while and realizes that she is talking about the knighthood. She confirms this and states that she is confident that he can be eligible for academy knighthood. A knight's honor is a system that rewards students who achieve exceptional results while attending the academy. Recipients of knighthood, regardless of their original social status, gain the right to establish a new noble house in the kingdom. The territory granted during knighthood is usually land connected to the recipient, which means Van could even be granted Galda Town if he earns the title. This was never an option for him before. Unlike his former self, he has not yet passed the age required to take the entrance exam. However, he has 3 questions. First, the exam requires a recommendation from a kingdom noble. Before he even finishes speaking, Helen immediately volunteers to write one for him. Second, he asks whether he can still receive knighthood even though he has no magic, since such a case has never happened before. While this is true, those who earned knighthood in the past all shared something in common. They transcended tradition and reached a new principle of magic. From the discovery of magical medicine to breakthroughs in magic circle research, using magic is not the only path. After all, subduing magicians without relying on magic power is also considered a great achievement, and his unique ability certainly fits that idea. If he can make everyone acknowledge his talent, he could become the first person from Galda to earn knighthood. Lastly, Van asks the girl what her goal is in all of this. Why bother helping him? He knows she is not doing this simply because she wants him to succeed. She smiles at him and asks if she is not trustworthy enough in his eyes. He admits that she looks like someone who wants to be in control of things. He wants to know her true intentions and why she is pushing him to become the Lord of Galda. She pauses for a while but then refuses to tell him her true reason for helping him. Silence stretches between them. Just then, Lena arrives and asks what he is doing by the lake. Van is shocked by the presence of his sister, who happened to hear that he fought the sect in the town earlier. Seeing her worried face, he assures her that everything is all right. As tears are about to fall from her eyes, she hugs her brother tight and buries her face in his chest. She states that she and their mother are all worried about him. Helen tells him that he does not have to trust her for now, but if he accepts knighthood, he will have the advantage to protect his mother and sister, aside from the honor he can give their village. After his talk with Helen, his mother confronts him about fighting the purifiers. She looks shocked and afraid for his safety at the same time. However, when she hears that people were thanking him for saving the town, she feels nothing but proud, thinking that he is really his father's child. She praises him for doing good and helping people. They then talk about the academy too, where the 2 women are shocked to hear that he wants to study at a school in the capital. He explains that even someone like him from Galda can enroll, and tells them about the reward he can get once he gets the recommendation from a noble like Helen. He then tells them his decision to enter the academy. They are so shocked when they learn about his decision, knowing that the school is only for those with magic. He clarifies that he will still be recognized inside the school and wants their race not to feel inferior to magic users anymore. He thinks for days about the right answer to his dilemma. In this lifetime, it will not make sense to be an assassin again because it only happened when he teamed up with Heirs, but in this lifetime, he will definitely not team up with him. But he also realizes that he cannot take the kingdom on his own without a plan. He does not know Helen's true intentions yet, but if he takes her offer, it could really help him take a different route than he did in his previous life. Since he has died before, he has more courage now to take risks. If there is even a sliver of hope, he will take it. With a determined face, he tells his family that he will definitely erase the discrimination against their race. For a moment, his mother sees a glimpse of his father in him. Seeing that they both have the same determination, she knows that she cannot stop him. A small tear falls from her eyes as she states that being stubborn runs in the family, and that she knows he will do the right thing and does not doubt him. He thanks his mother for supporting his decision, but she turns serious and asks him if he has already figured out how he will pay the school fees. He panics as he completely forgets about that part of going to school. She sighs deeply and states that she will figure out a way to support his needs at school. Hearing this, Lena volunteers to work as well to give her brother money for school. He stops them from thinking of working for him and starts to worry about his situation, realizing that there is no well-paying job in Galda that he could get. However, soon, the problem with money is solved when Helen gives him the reward money that he got from defeating the Purification sect, so now money is not a problem for him to enroll in the Magic Academy. Weeks pass, and Van is now ready to live his new life in the city. His mother reminds him that he will meet people who will mock him for being a Galda, but he has to endure without feeling inferior. She wants him to live with dignity since he is her pride and joy. Van promises to do his best. Lena interjects and tells her brother that when he comes back, she will make sure to cook him his favorite mushroom soup. He ruffles his sister's hair, saying that he will be back soon. He waves goodbye to his family, thinking that this time, he will definitely keep his promise. Later, he finally arrives at the prestigious Magic Academy. Many young candidates are coming to the academy, like Van. A young man approaches the guard by the entrance and he introduces himself as a noble from the Hohenberg family who was recommended by his father. The guard bows to the lad and permits him to go inside. Another candidate with a recommendation also approaches the guard, and she gets bowed to and is permitted inside, too. It is Van's turn to walk to the guard. He is shocked as he gets yelled at by the guard for approaching the academy. The onlookers see his red eyes and instantly judge him as filthy for being a Galda. Van tells the guard that he did not do anything wrong and just wants to take the exam. The guard tells him that he does not know where he is. Van retorts that anyone can take the exam regardless of status. The guard points his spear at him and tells him that he is acting above his station. Despite a blade being pointed at his neck, Van is more annoyed than scared. He looks at all the witnesses and can tell that he can't take the exam if he causes a disturbance in any way. Another older guard steps in to tell the other that he cannot cause violence in front of the exam candidates. Van feels relieved that someone reasonable showed up. Unfortunately for Van, the older guard calls him deluded for even trying to get an exam. The older guard tells him that while the academy does not discriminate based on student status, the exam still requires a recommendation from a kingdom noble. Van shows the guard the letter of recommendation. The old guard looks closer and sees that it even has the kingdom noble's seal attached to it. The other guard accuses him of forgery and tries to take the letter from him. Not wanting him to take it, Van slams him to the ground. The older guard asks why the other suddenly fell down, as he and the others did not see the attack. One of the examiners, Klaus, appears to ask what is happening. He commands so much respect that the guards kneel before him. The guards tell Klaus about Van, so the instructor asks who he is. Van introduces himself and tells him that he has been recommended by Helen Steinhartz. The mere mention of Helen's name shocks everyone. Klaus reads the recommendation letter carefully. He determines that it legitimately came from the Steinhardt family. Klaus apologizes for the way the guards treated him and permits him to enter. Everyone is whispering in shock as they are intrigued that a member of the Steinhardt's family has recommended a Galda. Inside the campus, Van sees that the other examinees are elite people. He recognizes one boy as the future master swordsman, Date. He looks around at more candidates and recognizes them as future elite magic users. He remembers how they became heroes of the kingdom while he remained in the shadows. He recalls how they became mere lackeys of the second prince because of the struggle for royal succession. The night he killed them is still clear in Van's head. He now sees that he needs to compete with the people in the spotlight in his next life. He is confident that if he can go toe-to-toe with the stars, then he might be able to change the kingdom. One of the candidates, named Falk, approaches Van and tells him that he has no right to stand so calmly in the academy. Van replies that standing around is not a crime. Simply saying this insults Falk, who goes on to say that a Galda like him has no right to be in the academy. Van thinks about how it would be very easy just to bow his head to escape trouble. He, however, remembers how his mother told him not to feel inferior around people. He also remembers his previous life when Heinz told him to never bow his head if he wants the day of equality to come. Falk feels insulted that Van doesn't seem to be listening to him and picks him up in the air like a child. Van warns him that it was he who struck him first. Van grips Falk's wrists, making the bully go to his knees. Van explains that he is using his opponent's own force against him to manipulate his movement, and that it is the same technique he used on the guard earlier. Onlookers see how Falk goes to his knees. To add to the humiliation, Van smiles and offers to help him up. Falk slaps his helping hand away and then activates a magic circle to get ready to attack Van. A commanding voice is suddenly heard to tell Falk to stop. It is revealed to be Heinz, who acts like an angel who advises Falk not to antagonize people simply because they are Galda, since they should always strive for peace. Falk bows before Heinz and apologizes for his behavior. Heinz tells him that he does not need to be so formal and asks him to treat him like any other exam candidate. Van is shocked that he is looking at Heinz in his younger state. The candidates recognize Heinz as the 9th prince, and they are impressed by his humility to take the exam like everybody else, as well as how he shows tolerance towards a Galda. Van now recalls that Heinz told him once that he used to attend the academy. Heinz sees Van and offers a hand in friendship as fellow exam candidates. Van thinks about how welcoming his smile is. He can no longer look at it the same since he now knows the true dark figure behind it. Van would like to kill him right now, but he tries to control his rage and focus his sights on why he came to the academy in the first place. He turns his back away from Heinz and tells the prince that he did not come to the academy to be friends with him. The dumbfounded Heinz lowers his hand. The onlookers think Van is acting rudely and are not surprised based on their perception of how Galdas are. Falk is one of the onlookers, grinding his teeth at Van. Klaus appears to tell the candidates that registration is now closed. He says he will guide them to the exam venue known as the Shadow Forest. they go to the boundary before the Shadow Forest. The other examiner, named Bren, informs them that the forest will serve as the venue for the entrance exam. He goes on to say that the environment will test the power of each candidate. He explains that the Shadow Forest harbors great magical energy and that their task is to pick and bring back the magic-infused flower called the Tears of Heaven. He warns them that there are many beasts wielding for magical power, too. Bren warns them that interference between candidates is not allowed, but that they can cooperate and form groups with the caveat that each group member can bring back one Tear of Heaven each. He tells them that the time limit is until sunset. Klaus informs them of the Guardian badge they need to wear before entering the forest, and that they can crush it if ever they are in danger, so that an examiner will immediately come to their rescue. Klaus warns that requesting rescue also means immediate disqualification. The examiners announce the beginning of the exam. Multiple candidates go to each other to find their groupmates. Van finds that he is the only one alone, as no one wants to team up with him. However, he does not care, as he thinks it is easier to work alone. Van approaches Bren and asks for his Guardian badge. The examiner looks at him with disdain, but still hands it over to him. As Van enters the forest, Falk watches him. Inside the forest, Van faces a green bear beast demon immediately. He recognizes beast demons as animals with strong magical power that can be more troublesome than humans in many cases. The bear charges straight at him. Van hits it with a punch straight to the chest. He calls his attack the Crushing Strike and explains that it uses force waves generated by the strike to penetrate surface defenses and cause internal damage. The bear foams at the mouth and then falls to the ground. Van looks behind him, knowing people are following him. The two who followed him instantly hid themselves behind a large tree. It annoys Van that they are barely concealing their presence. Behind the tree is Falk, who thinks Van used poison to take down the bear and judges him for using a dirty Galda trick. His partner, Alex, asks him if he is really going to attack him when the rules state they can't interfere with other candidates. Falk says he is confident that they won't be in trouble for it because he is sure that the examiners have no intention of letting a Galda pass the test, especially one who was rude to the prince. He smiles at the thought of killing Van without consequences. Meanwhile, the examiner Bren is in a huge dungeon, being guided by a guard through its corridors. They stop at an iron prison door, and Bren asks that the guard hand him the key to it. Bren assures the guard that they do not need to fear the beast inside the prison since they control it using magic. Bren reveals that the beast will only target Van. He says that it would be damaging to the Academy's honor if a Galda like him passes. He shares his plan to make it look like Van died during the exam from a natural accident. The guard asks what will happen if other candidates get hurt too. Bren assures him that there would be no other candidate who would team up with Van because he is a Galda, so no one else will get hurt. Bren opens the door with the key. As the gate opens, he orders the beast within to eliminate the filthy Galda for the Academy's pride. Within the shadows are the glowing eyes of the beast. Klaus is at the forest entrance and is looking at the sky as he senses that there is danger approaching somewhere. Bren returns to the forest, so Klaus asks him where he has gone. Bren tells him that he was just getting ready for the next part of the exam. His smile makes Klaus suspicious that he did something wrong. Meanwhile, Van has found a bundle of the Tears of Heaven flowers. He thinks about how he will pass if he returns with one of the flowers. He looks behind him and tells his stalkers to come out. Falk and Alex reveal themselves. Falk is impressed that Van managed to notice them and insults him for comparing a Galda's nose to that of a dog. Van comes back by saying he has experience with cowards who attack from the shadows. He notices the irony of his saying that when he used to be an assassin who struck from behind. Falk claims that they are coming for him to prove that Galdas like him are unfit for the Academy. Van tells him that he is making excuses and that he just wants revenge because he embarrassed him in front of everyone before. Van claims that he will beat his petty pride out of him. This angers Falk, who, along with Alex, powers up for battle. Van can tell that Falk is a spellcaster mage, while Alex is a sorcery swordsman. He reviews that the three types of magic combat are projecting spells as a spellcaster mage, channeling magical power into weapons as a sorcery swordsman, and containing magic within the body to enhance their physical abilities as a magic martial artist. Van looks closely at Falk's face and can tell from how nervous he is that he has no killing experience yet. He commends the bully for at least having the guts to try killing. Van thinks about how he cannot kill them since a noble child dying means their house will mobilize everything to find the culprit and exact revenge on their family. Aside from that, Van decides he will live a life in the light this time around. He decides that he will not kill them, and instead will make them admit defeat by breaking their spirits. The more Falk looks at Van's red eyes, the more he hates him. He summons a strong slash of wind towards Van's direction. Van evades, but it slightly cuts his left arm. Falk commends him for dodging but warns him that he will have a hard time since someone without magic like him cannot see the attack coming. He offers mercy if Van kneels and begs for forgiveness. Van replies that it was just a gentle breeze for him. This angers Falk even more, who summons his next wind attack. Van dodges it easily. Falk is confused about how he can see his attack, but in reality, it's his killing intent that was leaking all over the place. A punch is planted into his gut, and it's strong enough to knock the wind out of him in an instant. Seeing this, Ralph also gets ready to fight and coats his blade in light. He leapt in to strike, but even from that distance, it's obviously just simple enchantment magic. If the sword isn't touched, then it's just an ordinary weapon. It isn't as easy as it sounds, and the top speed of a sword reaches thrice that of a punch. However, Van's lightning-fast footwork was more than enough for him to take control of his opponent's wrist instead of his blade. In the blink of an eye, he circled to Ralph's back, his arm still in his hand, and did a quick chop to his joint. Both boys were on the ground, beaten before they could even do anything. The former assassin asks if they want to continue, but warns that he won't hold back anymore if they do. His deadly gaze makes it obvious that he's being serious, so Falk urgently apologizes and asks for mercy. However, his cries are interrupted as Van sharply turns to the other direction. The two were confused, but he sensed danger and was sure that something was wrong. Realizing what it was, he urgently tells the weaker boys to get away from there right now. A massive presence approached them, leaving a trail of fallen trees behind it. It was too late. They could only stare in shock and fly away as it charged with its enormous horns. Even Van was caught off guard by the unexpected enemy, but the Hellsboar, a demon beast, was getting ready to strike again. There was no reason for such a high-ranking beast to be in that forest. It started pawing the ground, signifying that the next charge was already coming soon. The beast is also called the Cursed Fang, and its charge is said to be as strong as siege magic. Understanding the situation in an instant, Van tells the two to get out of there right now, if they can still move. Ralph was in a daze, but Falk says it's no use anymore. The charge from earlier wrecked his ankle, and the swelling indicates a major fracture. Standing was all he could manage. Carrying him would make them too slow, and against the Hellsboar, that spells death. What's more, the enemy has a habit of relentlessly pursuing, once it's marked its prey. There's still the badge that can call for help, but how long would it take rescue to get there? Falk tells his friend to leave him and run away on his own. Acting all valiant, he says he should be able to handle something like this alone. It looks like Ralph was about to, but he surprisingly pats his comrade with a smile, saying it would be a disgrace to abandon him. While the two prove their bond, Van stared intently, and tells them to break the badge while he buys time for rescue to arrive. However, failing the exam that way would also disgrace their noble houses. Rather than staining their family's name, they would rather die, trying to fight against the demonic beast. The display looks heroic, but it was nothing more than a headache to Van. He calls them out for being driven by nothing but cheap pride. If they're going to fight, they might as well fight to win with the pride of kingdom nobles. The Galda's arrogance irks them. Unfortunately, there was no time to fight as the beast was charging in again. Bren delightfully looks up and says it's about time. Overhearing, Klaus asks what he's talking about. He says he's just thinking out loud, and asks if anyone has called for help with the badge. Told that no examinee has used it so far, he smirks in sly satisfaction, believing the boy didn't even have time to use it. The exam candidate's belongings were collected before it started, and Klaus retrieved a particular bag among that pile. Unbeknownst to the others, he had the Hellsboar memorize the scent and turned it into a target. Considering its strength, the job must already be done, and all that's left is to wait for news. The evil proctor chuckled on his own. Back in the forest, the boar snarled and pawed the ground once more. As expected, it charged at its enemies with all its power. Van intends to stop it to create an opening, while the others hit it with their strongest attacks. Falk complains about the Galda giving them orders, but there's no time to argue as the beast was going to kill them all. The young man reacted and moved in to meet it before building enough momentum. Flexing his hand, he uses a crushing blow strike and plants it at the monster's head. The force sends shockwaves throughout the area, making the examinees drop their mouths in awe. It's a technique that targets the point, where an enemy's motion of attack originates. When anything with four legs strikes, the first thing that moves is its head, just like the boar. Despite hitting that point, the boar just roared, completely negating the damage. Van's current strength is too low, due to the loss of muscle mass and body weight from regressing. He signals at his peers who were waiting behind. Falk, despite his pride, obeys and unleashes his rending wind at the enemy's massive body. Meanwhile, Ralph also struck, leaping high up to swing his enhanced blade at it. Like the others, his weapon just bounces off the thick fur that's left everyone's attacks useless. Instead of being damaged, The boar seems to have been angered even more. Van orders everyone to get down, and they barely escape with their lives as the enemy plowed through the forest and sent them flying. It hurts for sure, but at least they were still alive. Falk deflected it slightly with his wind, but there surely won't be a next time. Ralph wonders if this is the end for them, as his sword couldn't even get through it all. However, Van refused to give up and just says that they're going to do it one more time. They couldn't believe his confidence, but he just assures them that they're going to finish it off for good. Falk protests the idea and reiterates that none of their attacks even remotely worked. He's then told to mix rocks into his wind to increase its killing power. On the other hand, the others advised to thrust a single point in his blade through the beast's ribs. They question what he was doing. Van should understand that they can't win, and that he can escape by using the injured ones as bait. Considering how they tried to kill him just now, he should have no reason to hold back. Fortunately for them, he isn't interested in petty revenge. His goal is for his family and the entire Galda population to be recognized as part of the kingdom. With that said, he can't abandon comrades from the same country. They're struck by the valiance and heroism in his words, and they can't help but think back to the pathetic times they tried to oppress the young man. Falk grit his teeth in pure regret. Not caring about the emotional moment, the Hellsboar charged at them again, and Van signals everyone to fire. Following the signal, Falk cast his ability and unleashed a huge torrent of wind, mixing dust and rubble into it. The dark gust infused with sand and gravel assaulted the demon beast and successfully blocked its vision. Now, Van was free to leap towards the target safely. He aims for the thick fur on its back and gets a good grip. The shoulder blades of quadrupeds differ from humans as they aren't directly connected to the spine. This creates a flexible range of motion in the forelegs, but weakens their stability against unexpected force. Using Harmony Technique rotation throw, he flips the beast around and slams it to the ground. The unexpected move stuns it for a moment, making the perfect opening to thrust at the base of its front leg, where the heart is located. Ralph raised his enhanced blade above the target, but seeing the boar's eyes made him hesitate. Convincing himself and gritting his teeth through it, he drives the blade in, with a loud war cry. It looks like they actually won against it, but Van knows better than to believe that right away. While the blade did pierce through its flesh, it missed the target's thick and beating heart. Beating stronger, the Hellsboar unleashed its destructive roar, sending insane shockwaves throughout the forest. Only a few possess this special ability that releases a magic-infused roar that knocks everything around it. The young examinees were sent crashing into the uprooted trees, and it felt like the roar wrecked their insides as well. Ralph couldn't even move and was close to death with ruptured internal organs. To make matters worse, the beast stood above him, deeming him the first casualty. He knew he was going to die. Just then, Van appeared between them, stopping the boar by holding its tusks in place. Using Harmony Technique, Spiral, he doesn't take the force head-on, and instead disperses it into the ground with a circular motion. The boar stood its ground, enraged, and refused to let the boy redirect any of its energy at all. Van considers using his last resort. He doesn't know how long his weak body can hold, but it's better than dying there. Again, he tells the others to run for their lives. They finally start to do as told, and scamper while the beast bears all its weight into the young man's puny body. Instead of pushing down, it knocks its head up and sends its enemy flying and crashing into a tree. The others worry and try to rush to him, but are told not to get any closer. With empowered legs, the raging Hellsboar charged at the unmoving young man. While Falk ran to him, Van grit his teeth as he's forced into a decision. Starting an incantation, dark energy seeped out of his body as a demonic presence was released. However, something hit the boar before things got completely out of hand. It was knocked to its side, saving the target just in time. He recognizes the magic, and as expected, Heirs was there, saying it was a close call. The other two are shocked to find the prince there, and urgently try to get him out of the dangerous place. Unfortunately, his pride and sense of duty as a prince insists that he protect the members of the kingdom. They have mixed feelings about his presence, but are amazed by his principles. On the other hand, Van has seen this millions of times, and knows how Heirs captures the hearts of people with words and sends them to their deaths. Calling on to everyone, the prince encourages everyone to combine their strengths, but the former assassin flatly rejects it. The others are stunned, not expecting such brazenness against a royalty, even from him. Repeating his refusal, Van emphasizes that his power isn't needed in this battle. The other two tell him to show some respect to the prince, adding that he saved him earlier. On the contrary, the Galda believes that they would have defeated it already if he didn't intervene. His immodest self was as astonishing as ever. Instead of being offended, Heirs just asks if they really don't need his help. Intent on proving it, Van walks up to the recovered boar and tells him to shut up and watch like royalty always does. The beast ran at them again, and while they all confidently stood their ground, the two boys hesitated and hoped to get at least one strike in. With a cool head, Van tells them not to rush, as dying now would be a waste of their life. They only had one shot left in them, but that should be more than enough. Told to wait for his signal, the two nod their heads in affirmation and obediently prepare. Meanwhile, Heinz watched in silence. It was finally time to settle things once and for all, so Van charged in to meet the beast halfway. Although he panicked last time, he knows now that he can win without using that technique. The Hellsboar struck but wasn't as aggressive this time. Having failed 3 times already, it judged the human group as a formidable enemy, and was now attacking with a lot more caution. This time, it unleashed a hook thrust, which the boy easily dodged. He can barely handle it with the smaller opening. The game of cat and mouse continued, leaving the others to watch as the Galda skillfully evaded the enormous enemy's tusks. It's difficult to believe how fast he was moving, despite not having any magic power. Now witnessing his movements for the first time, Heinz knew he wasn't just fast. By manipulating his center of gravity, he's eliminated all preparatory movements. As it's a technique only used by high-ranking martial artists, the prince wonders who he is. In addition to his continuous dodging, Van was also counter-attacking here and there, piling damage up no matter how small it seemed. It's a fierce assault comparable to raging flames, but strikes without magic are no different from a gentle caress to the demon beast. It roared in complete frustration, the only effect of the relentless smacking. However, this was exactly what the assassin intended. The goal is to irritate it enough and draw a certain move. Finally, it comes. The Hellsboar opened its mouth wide, in taking air in preparation for its destructive roar, just as they saw a while ago. He then calls to the wind user, who casts his rending wind at the enemy's open mouth. Infused with sand, it tears into the beast's vulnerable respiratory system, forcing it to turn over in pain and suffocation. Since this is still far from enough, Van follows through by closing the gap and using both hands to unleash a crushing blow. It hits the boar right on its thick skull. The shockwaves delivered from left and right converge at a single point inside the skull. They're like 2 ripples merging to form a larger wave. This time, the attack is successful enough to make the boar foam in the mouth and release its magic defenses. It was finally time for the killing blow, so Ralph raised his blade, focusing all the enhancement into the sharp edge. With a loud shout, he swung down and surprisingly cut the beast in half. It was unbelievable, but the 3 children actually managed to beat the demon beast. They then see Van rubbing the ground with his feet and ask what he's doing. Heinz's eyes open wide upon seeing this, but the young man ignores the question and just extends his hand to Ralph, praising him for a job well done. He accepts the help, saying he's okay, and sharing that he thought his organs were damaged. The roar is magic infused to scramble ear canals, but covering one's ears should negate its effects. It's something to remember, although none of them really want to fight the boar again. That said, the beast wasn't the true goal of the exam. Van gasped in horror, realizing that the battle destroyed most of the flowers thereafter. There are only 2 left in good condition. As they were warned, forming large groups would result in complications. It was a terrible ending, especially since they had no time left to look for more. The 2 boys looked at each other with understanding. They take the flowers and naturally hand one over to the Royal Highness. Giving it to someone who just watched looks like he's sucking up, but it's something a vassal must do. To Van's surprise, they hand the other flower to him, a hated Galda. Falk plays it cool, saying he just doesn't want to feel like he owes him anything. Recalling the moment earlier, he says his name isn't just Wind User and properly introduces himself. Ralph does the same and tells him to remember them. It's the first time he's experienced such kindness from peers, but Van reached out with a smile. That said, they'll never meet again anyway, if they fail the examination. Heinz's voice comforts them, saying there's no need for that. They see the prince kneeling over the fallen flowers with a gentle touch. Smiling, he infuses them with his magic and brings them back to life. Eyes sparkle upon witnessing the amazing power of light magic. Handed the flowers that seemingly bloomed after basking under sunlight, the boys thanked the benevolent prince. The scene was uncannily familiar to Van. Just like that, the treacherous royal's axe and charisma has fooled another set of followers. Nonetheless, the sunset was nearing, so it was time to return to the base of examinations. Not minding the blatant disrespect, Heinz calls to him and notes how he covered his footprints with dirt earlier. Van wonders what it's about, so he's told that it's an assassin's etiquette, where they hide tracks of their own technique. Based on the martial arts he used and the ingrained habit he acted on, the prince asks if the boy is perhaps an assassin. The question stuns the atmosphere. Heinz has a lot of enemies. The king has strengthened his rule by taking princesses from conquered lands as his queens. However, his mother, who became the 5th, was already a noble and was first queen of the Faranese kingdom. As such, His siblings and their mothers fear the probability of him rising to the throne. An assassination attempt might not be far off, which is also why he came to the exam alone. If the boy before him is their agent, then he must deal with it right now. Van was still silent. He realizes that he let his guard down after winning, and ended up giving in to his old habits. Calling himself a former assassin wasn't exactly an option, so he has no choice but to play dumb. The young man chuckles and scratches his head, saying he has no idea about such things. Heinz wasn't one to fall for his tricks so easily, so Van switches it up and tells him to think how he wants to think. A tense stillness filled the air, and the weight of his words soon hit everyone there. Falk puts himself between them and tries to make him understand, but before anyone could do anything, they see the accused right in front of Heinz, holding his shoulder in the blink of an eye. The boy says he's kidding, and asks that he not make such a scary look. While the others tried to make sense of it, Van smiles, asks the prince to be understanding of a country bumpkin's lack of manners. The royal observed him silently. He showed an opening on purpose, but aside from closing the distance, he didn't do anything. Deep inside, the former assassin calmed himself as he lose his shot at knighthood if he acted hastily. Heinz doesn't mind his words and disrespect, but has one more question. He dials it back to the habit of hiding his footsteps, and again asks if he isn't an assassin. Van says it's a trick taught by Helen, who said it's essential for him who relies on hand-to-hand combat. It's a lie, of course, but he has no choice. However, the mention of the woman's name and recommendation shocks everyone, especially since she isn't just from any noble family. He thought she seemed high and mighty, but it isn't that simple. The Ice Flower is in the Academy's top 5, so it wouldn't be odd for her to know assassination techniques. What's more, the house has long served the kingdom, so she has no reason to plot against Heinz. Asked why someone like her would recommend him, Van just vaguely explains that she told him to take the exam. The prince explains that she probably intends to have him serve her house after graduating. In fact, he would have done the same, had he met the young man first. He waves the boy's shallow thanks off. Besides, if there is a plot against him, the more likely chance is for it to be the demon beast that would have killed him if he met it without them. Considering the three his lifesavers, the prince bows his head in gratitude. The two nobles are surprised by his humility and urgently accept, but the Galda looked away, saying he didn't fight for his sake. Falk was sick of his disrespect, and scolds the ill-mannered young man. Van shows defiance instead of seeking a reward and praise. To someone showered with reverence most of his life, Heinz takes great interest in such a man. The base of the examination was filled with applicants. Some have passed after bringing the flower back as instructed, while others returned empty-handed, heartbroken and wondering how to tell their families. The proctors were waiting for the prince and 3 more people. Bren found it odd, and questioned what was happening. Originally, the forest only had beasts under the prince's level, as he wanted to avoid injuries. However, the Hellsboar hasn't returned either, making him fear that something wrong has happened. People started to turn and gasp as someone appeared from the woods. Bren also looked, expecting the royal to be there. To his surprise, it's Van, who he believed should be dead from the demon beast attack. He's shocked, unable to comprehend why the Galda was still alive. Van's arrival shocks the entire grounds, especially Bren, who did something heinous to try and kill him. Klaus asks how it went, but the evil teacher slips and questions how in the world he was alive, making them wonder why he's acting like it's such a bad thing. He cleans up after himself, saying he's just impressed that he survived alone. Refuting it, Van gestures to the area behind him, and everyone turns to Falk and Ralph, who were hauling the Hellsboar's massive severed head across the ground. The evil teacher couldn't believe what was happening. The applicants explained that they brought it back, as it might have been sent to kill the prince. Klaus is shocked that it was even there, while Bren slips again about how it failed to finish them off. The crowd is silent as his words hit their ears, but he brushes it off and pulls another lie, about being impressed by their performance. Just then, Heinz appeared with a bright smile, saying it was a truly magnificent battle. His institution baffles the teachers, and they ask if he also participated in the dangerous situation. Hearing that he was there by coincidence, Bren starts to panic at what might end up happening. He basically sent a demon beast after royalty, and he'd be done for if word of it gets out. The prince asks if he's okay, as the teacher looked unwell. Brushing it off, he just praises Heinz for defeating something as strong as the Hellsboar. Piling it on, he raises his hands and cheers for the kingdom, but anyone could sense his shadiness. The young man reiterated that he was a mere spectator, and places the achievement on the 3 boys, more specifically saying that they all might have died if Van was not there. Mutters of disbelief erupt with the mention of the Galda, but Ralph supports him, saying he knows a lot about magic and is an amazing person. Even Falk openly shares that they fought and won under his command. Bren starts to question it, but Heinz says that it's only natural for someone who's been recommended by Helen Steinhardt's. She didn't actually teach him anything, but it's the story he has to go with. Meanwhile, the others stared and tried to comprehend the prince's high praise. Combined with the Steinhardt's recommendation, they finally start to acknowledge the Galda. Having been fair from the start, Klaus bows his head to politely express his gratitude. As one of the kingdom's subjects, he is truly grateful for what the boy did. Van starts to insist that he just counterattacked against the beast, but thinks better of it and moves on by handing the required flower to pass the exam. The other three do the same, so Klaus turns to his fellow proctor, who clears his throat despite himself and calls their names: the prince, Heinz, the nobles, Falk and Ralph, and finally, the Galda, Van. Everyone confirms their presence, and Bren formally acknowledges their acceptance into the school. After a long and tumultuous afternoon, Van became a student of the academy. That aside, the prince orders a thorough investigation and report into the demon beast incident. A while later, all the new students were gathered in the hall and welcomed by the headmaster. What is asked of them is not merely magical talent, but above all, the true nobility to become the kingdom's sword and shield when the time asks for it. In his previous life, Van never imagined that he would be standing alongside nobles. It's a small step, but was proof that the world was changing, and he's going to walk the path until the day discrimination against Galda is eliminated. Above him, Helen watched intently and soon walked through the academy's halls. Upon reaching a door, she entered a room where 4 people sat around a round table, waiting for her. Acknowledging them, she says everyone seems to be there, but Karina calls her out for acting all high and mighty when she's arriving late. Not one to waste time, Amelia then asks why they've all been gathered there today. Arnulf says there's only one topic the 5 brilliant crowns would discuss. Honus, the 8th prince, agrees, saying it's to deal with the foreign substance that's infiltrated the school. The way he puts it is telling. Quite an unusual event has taken place, to say the least. After all, for the first time since its founding, the academy has accepted a Galda. Most of the 5 disagreed with the decision and considered it a grave matter to be addressed. To make matters worse, the one who recommended his enrollment is among the 5 of them. They demand an explanation from Helen, who didn't bat an eye at their words. The academy gathers noble sons and daughters with strong magic and high pride, which usually clashes and causes duels. To keep order in such an academy, a group of idealistic students took it upon themselves to form a disciplinary organization and called themselves the 5 Brilliant Crowns. Helen is told to explain herself and why she'd recommend a Galda's admission. She says she simply acknowledged his strength and nothing more, but Karina questions the mere idea of a Galda being strong. To many, they're people cursed by God and cannot possess any real power. Despite her calm demeanor, Amelia silently agrees with her and asks how someone without magic can train to become the kingdom's sword and shield. To those without any magic, God does not exist, and this is common sense for the country. Striking it at common sense is convenient, and is the stock excuse people use to stop thinking and justify bad customs. The royal prince is insulted by her indirect jab at his family, but the woman remains unfazed by his scowl. With this, Arnulf suggests testing the boy to see what he's made of. One way or another, they can find out if Van really has the power to protect the academy. Onus is elated by the idea and asks if Helen agrees with the proposal. If they conclude that he lacks strength, then her judgment will naturally also be called into question. Knowing this, she still has no problems about it. She doesn't even care who they send, and warns them against underestimating her beneficiary. While the prince scoffs at her arrogant words, Karina volunteers to take on the responsibility of testing the boy. He tells her to go all out, and Helen just wonders if Van has somehow caught her interest. Losing her smile, she says she just wants to crush the ice flower's favorite, along with her arrogance. Meanwhile, the young man in question was walking through the academy halls. It was as normal as ever, with people attending their classes, worrying about rankings, and making small talk with their classmates. It's been a week since Van enrolled, and he's been living a surprisingly peaceful life since then. That said, he's had a few greetings here and there. Just some time ago, the class sat quietly in front of the lecturer. With a nasty look on his face, he calls the Galda on and asks him to explain 4-element theory in magic. He's silent for a while, which is only natural as the question is way beyond their level. The professor mocks him, saying it might be too much for a race that can barely read, but Van surprises them by giving a perfect and concise answer to the ill-intent question. The old man stared in shock, as his substantial explanation proves his extensive knowledge. With a knowing smile, the young man asks if he'd like a more detailed discussion. This shuts the lecturer, who proceeds with his lesson. Since then, the blatant harassment has completely stopped. Ralph ran up to him and gave a playful smack on his back. Noting the serious expression on his face, his friend invites him to have lunch. Van vaguely says that something is probably because of him and Falk. Asked what he means, he just says that they've been a huge help, and walks to the cafeteria. While they note how weird he's been acting lately, a woman suddenly called to the freshman. He turns to her and asks what she wants, but she just scowls at him, saying he walked right past her without doing anything. Explaining that they didn't notice, they politely bow and apologize to the senior, but Van finds the tip of a sword just inches from his neck. Ralph freaks out and demands to know why she'd do such a thing. While commoners are expected to kneel before nobles, Galda must grovel on the floor. He argues that there's no need for him to go so far, in an academy where they're all just students. However, she refuses to give in and tries to make him understand the situation he's in, putting the blade even closer to his neck. Ralph defends his friend, saying she's out of line, even for an upper-class man. She orders him not to be so stubborn, and be obedient for a peaceful academy life. The former assassin wasn't one to be afraid of such petty threats. Basic respect between juniors and seniors is fine, but oppression isn't something he appreciates. Seeing him grip her blade, she instinctively pulls back, wary that he might take it from her. With her weight coming down on the thin blade, Van uses a quick chop to break the other end off, letting it clatter noisily to the floor. By combining bending and twisting, he pushes the metal to its limit, and shatters it with a sharp impact. Pointing a sword not enhanced with magic at him was basically asking for it to be snapped. Such blades are usually meant for training, and can't withstand real combat. She says real swords aren't allowed on campus if one isn't a brilliant crown. While he takes note of the name, the girl turns away, adding that she's done her part already. Another voice confirms that he does have fangs. Karina approached, listing his faults and saying she has to take action, as part of the disciplinary committee. The others are shocked that the sword princess herself was there. On the other hand, Van knew her from a different time, when she held a much fiercer title. She will be known as the woman who reaped thousands of lives on the battlefield. But what was she doing there? In Van's first life as an assassin, there were several rebellions that shook the kingdom. Behind the scenes was a militant faction of purification sects called the Circle of White Annihilation. The most feared among them was Karina, a demon swordsman who mastered all sword techniques and killed numerous heroes. The kingdom eventually destroyed the circle at a great cost, but the chaos that came with it sparked the later struggle for the throne. Van only saw her in the battlefield once, so why was the sworn enemy of the kingdom in the Magic Academy? She adds another charge to his list of offenses. Asked what it is, she says it's just plain rude for him to stare at an upper-class man without saying anything. He bows an apology, explaining that she honestly didn't look like a senior to him. However, his words only serve to insult her. Ralph urgently tells him to stop, and says that she's one of the 5 crowns, but he doesn't even know what that group is. They pertain to the Academy's top 5 students, with real power and top-class family backgrounds. Karina enrolled at the mere age of 13, and was as real a powerhouse as one could get. His introduction is satisfactory enough for her to thank him with a smile. Van is surprised that someone like her was actually from upper nobility, and it must have been kept a secret after she became a rebel. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to meet her in the academy. Perhaps this was a chance for him to stop the rebellion by killing her before she reaches the peak of her strength. It would stop the succession war before it even starts, and destroy Hein's shot at the throne. He stops his thoughts for now, and Karina adds yet another charge to his list. She sharply accuses him of thinking of someone else, when he's standing in front of her. Seeing her reach for her sword, he immediately puts his guard up. The blade is slowly unsheathed, reminding them that she's allowed to carry a real weapon. He recognized her stance. A surprise draw is her signature move, and her victims die so fast that they don't even see her blade. Ralph tells him to just apologize to avoid any further conflict, but Van just instructs his friend to stand back. Taking a fighting stance of his own, he says there's something he must confirm. His decision is mere foolishness to her, but he doesn't care about her opinion. The air was tense and still, and the onlookers couldn't even breathe from the anticipation of what's going to happen next. Karina moves past her target and completes her attack in the blink of an eye. The delayed impact hits Van, and the pain forces him to kneel to the floor, much to Ralph's worry. Meanwhile, the brilliant crown was silent. She surprisingly postpones his punishment for another time and walks away. After all, it'd be a waste to finish off a man like him way too soon. The 2 boys watched her leave in silence. While walking in the empty hall, the senior asks why they spared the offender. Karina suddenly fell to the floor, saying it isn't that she spared him. She was breathing hard. Instead of making any comments, she shows her chest, which was struck precisely during the exchange. This was a shocking